Defense of the West, let freedom ring. Last time we defined freedom by noting there's one thing in the world that belongs only to you and not to anybody else, and that's your body. You have the right to do whatever you want to your body. It's yours. You can't do what you want to other people's bodies. That belongs to them. Do whatever you want, just don't hurt anyone else. Having defined freedom, we now went on and wondered why Mill thought that freedom was good. After all, in the earlier lecture, Philosophy is More Pleasurable Than Sex, the highest good wasn't freedom. The highest good was happiness. Everybody wants happiness at all times and places. Happiness was the highest good. So freedom is only good if we can show that it makes people happy. But that, of course, isn't always obvious. Certainly if you see the devil lectures, why would anybody think that allowing people, say, the freedom to decide when to drink alcohol and how much alcohol to drink, why would anybody think that makes for happiness? Look at the enormous problems that our society has with alcoholism and abuse of alcohol all over the world, by the way, not just our society. Staggers me when I think about how much beer they must produce in this world. But I remember this objection being put in the mouth of my early childhood was a famous philosopher, my mother, on my childhood trips around New York City, guided by my father. My father was born and raised in New York City, knew just about every square inch of it. So when you got a tour of New York with my father, you didn't just see the highlights, Empire State Building, Lincoln Center, Fifth Avenue. He would show you the other side of New York also, the slums of Harlem, the South Bronx, where I myself was born, Brooklyn, and since I'm talking about alcohol, the famous one in Lower Manhattan, known as the Bowery, famous for its drunks, its winos, used to be called Bowery Bums, and I saw them just a few years ago. I was in New York visiting my folks, and I was taking a walking trip from Lower Manhattan, Greenwich Village, to my favorite Indian restaurants on the Lower East Side. Happened just by accident to walk right through the Bowery, and there were the bums, just as I remembered them, sitting propped up against the buildings, half-empty bottles of cheap rot-gut wine in their hands, and even though it was still pretty early in the afternoon, some of them had already had enough to drink that they were laying there, passed out drunk, in the middle of the sidewalk, and sometimes they're laying there in the middle of the sidewalk, they wake up, they've been drinking rot-gut whiskey, they're nauseous, they gotta throw up. No way they can walk to the bushes, the floor is spinning much too fast to walk on, but they gotta throw up, so they throw up, and you see them laying there, passed out in their own vomit. And I once had a student come up to me after class, among the richest students I have ever taught for sure, and she told me she had had this experience, and not from drinking rot-gut stuff, from drinking the good stuff and mixing it in the wrong way. And she told me, Professor, by the way, I've had the experience not only of waking up passed out in my own vomit, but also waking up passed out in her own. Clue is, of course, she's been drinking too much, lose control of your bladder, urine, laying there in your own vomit and urine, and they are subject to attack by passing skinhead punks who like to come in from the nearby East Village, and when they see a drunk laying there passed out in their own vomit and urine, they get amusement by lighting the drunk's hair on fire. And so I remember my mother, good utilitarian thinker, good happiness thinker that she was, appealing to the principle of happiness in the name of happiness, she used to say, should we not pick these poor drunks up, take them to detox, dry them out, take them to a rehabilitation center so they can learn a skill, get a good job, find a nice girl. That was my mother's key to happiness, her solution to all of life's problems. She used to tell me all the time, just get a good job and find a nice girl. And when I used to hear my mother say this, I used to think, oh, this is just my mother's way of trying to force her ways of life on other human beings, on these passed out drunks. My mother was always doing that to me. me, trying to force her way of living on me, and I knew I didn't like it very much. I wanted to live my own way, and I figured here's my mother up to her old tricks, trying to force her views on how life should be lived on other human beings, on these passed out drunks. As I have gotten older, I find that I am coming to agree more with my mother. I'm not sure if I should worry. That's a sign of impending senility. Actually, my mother has no signs of senility. But I mean, think about the comparison. On the one hand, laying there passed out, drunk in some sidewalk, laying in your vomit and urine, subject to attack by passing skinhead punks. On the other hand, having a good job, an attractive partner that you love and who will love you for life, doesn't really seem to be much of a comparison, does it? So I will concede to thinkers like my mother, these individual drunks, they are not happy. I'm not going to try to argue, oh Mom, everybody's happy in their own way. You're happy as a middle-class suburban housewife. They're happy laying there passed out in vomit and urine. I'm not going to try to argue that. Clearly these people are not happy, or certainly they could be happier. But the question isn't, how does allowing them this freedom to fall into such degradation? It's not, how does that make them happy? We have to realize not everyone can be made happy. This is earth, not heaven. Sorry about that. We're dealing with humans, not angels or gods. There will always be problems. There will always be unhappiness. So if, as I go through the rest of these lectures, you manage to find a problem with something that I'm saying, that won't necessarily be regarded as fatal. Nothing is perfect. Everything has problems. The main idea, of course, is to maximize the good, minimize the bad. Make for the greatest happiness for the greatest number. On balance, as many people as happy as possible, as few people as unhappy as possible. So that changes the question. The question is no longer, how does allowing these people the freedom to fall into the terrible degradation of alcoholism, not how does it make them happy? That's not the issue. The question is, how does it make on balance for the greatest happiness in the society as a whole? Well, whose happiness does it make for? It doesn't make for theirs. Whose happiness does it make for? Well, why did my father take me on this trip in the first place? What did he want me to see? What did he hope I would learn? How many times did I have students put up their hands and say, that you didn't have it so bad? That would be very human, of course, to take comfort for yourself from somebody else's misery. I'm not sure that's really what my father wanted me to learn. What he wanted me to learn, of course, was to show me firsthand and close up what could happen to me, to show me an example of what could happen to me if I ever allowed myself to engage in the excess consumption of strong drink. After all, my father knew, everybody grows up. One day I was going to grow up and graduate from high school. I did, of course. Left his house, went off to college, lived in the dorms, and my father knew maybe one day somebody would come up to me and say something like, hey Steve, here's some alcohol, try some of this stuff. And by the way, when I was in college, the drinking age was 18, so there would have been nothing illegal about this. And maybe somebody, especially if it's somebody I respected and trusted, one of my friends offered me some alcohol, try some of this stuff, maybe I would try it. Maybe I would drink enough that I would get drunk. Maybe I would enjoy getting drunk. Does that ever really happen? Do people ever really enjoy getting drunk? I mean, sometimes you look at what is portrayed in the media and the news, and it seems like, as soon as you drink, your life goes in the toilet. People enjoy getting drunk. Of course, that's why they do it. They enjoy it very much, blowing off the stress, as I showed in the Freud lecture. But in any case, then, okay, so I drank with my friends. I got drunk. I enjoyed getting drunk. What might I do then the next night? Maybe I'll want to get drunk the next night, and maybe I'll enjoy getting drunk the next night. Do you ever enjoy getting drunk 2 nights in a row? Of course, on college campuses, often weekends start on Thursday night, in which case I'll do it again the next night, and the next night, and the next night, in which case, the way modern medicine sees this, if I have a biogenetic predisposition towards alcoholism, this could activate it. I'll wind up as an alcoholic. I'll be too drunk to get up to class. I'll flunk out of school and wind up as a bum in the Bowery, laying there in my own vomit and urine. And so my father wanted to show me firsthand and close up what could happen to me if I ever allowed myself to engage in the excess consumption of strong drink. And actually, of course, when I was in college back in the late 60s, early 70s, it wasn't so much alcohol. We did have a bar on campus. Nobody I knew ever went. Nobody wanted to drink alcohol in my generation, the 60s generation. Alcohol was the drug our parents did. Who wanted to be so uncool as to be like your parents? So my generation was famous for experimenting with a wide variety of drugs. Not that I ever did any, certainly I never inhaled, but I remember when I went to college, one of my good friends, unknown to us, behind the scenes, got addicted to heroin. We didn't know that at first, but over the course of the year, we watched his personality change. He went from being happy-go-lucky, effervescent guy to being dark and moody, and at the end of the semester, broke into the room of the smallest one of our friends and beat him up and stole everything that he had so he could get some money to buy some more heroin. Then I graduated from college and went out into the real world. I had a friend, an old friend actually, who was a lawyer, got a 750 on the law boards back then, which I think is the highest grade of anyone I ever knew who took the law boards, cruised through law school, hardly ever saw him study. Today is a prominent and successful local attorney, also, by the way, a champion swimmer. And I was visiting him one night and he got a telephone call, and I heard him say on the telephone he was talking about buying some China White. And, you know, as I said, I'm from the streets of New York City. I'm not naive. I know China White is a very exotic and potent form of heroin. And when he hung up the phone, I said to him, "Roy, you're negotiating to buy heroin? You do heroin?" I couldn't believe it, but he said to me, "Steve, if you keep it under control, I only do it once a month. That's not enough to get addicted to it. And unlike alcohol and some of the other drugs, heroin doesn't have any negative physical effects." And he told me it was the greatest pleasure he had ever experienced. He was a tall, good-looking guy. The girls were always all over him. When he talked about pleasure, I knew that he knew what he was talking about. And he's telling me heroin is the greatest pleasure. And just, you know, do it once a month. Do it with me once a month. We'll keep it under control. You won't get addicted. You won't suffer any of the unhappiness of addiction. It's a clean drug physically. It doesn't do anything to your body. Once a month, you can enjoy the greatest pleasures that a human being can enjoy and suffer no negative effects whatsoever. Had I not had my earlier experience with my friend whose life was ruined by heroin, had I not had that earlier experience when my trusted lawyer friend asked me if I would do heroin, might I have been more tempted to try it? Note how carefully I phrase that, by the way. Might I have been more tempted to try it? Obviously, of course, but since I saw what happened to my earlier friend, the main idea, if you can see firsthand and close up both sides of the issue, both paths that you might go down in life, then you are prepared as best as possible to know which path to go down. The famous phrase here, forewarned is forearmed. If you are warned beforehand about potential problems that may lay down a path in life, then you are armed as best you can be to deal with those problems. Just like, say, in football with the defense. If they're warned ahead of time what play the offense is going to run, then they are armed ahead of time as best they can be to stop that play. Doesn't mean necessarily, by the way, that they're going to be able to stop the play. Maybe there's somebody on the offense who's just so fast and shifty that they're going to get by the defense even if the defense knows what's coming. But that gives you the best possible chance. So certainly some people will still fall into alcoholism, and probably my father knew that, being a man of the streets, by the way, but he knew this was the way to minimize the chance that I would be seduced by alcohol and drugs. Show people both paths, show people all sides of the issue, show people all the choices. Generally, the faith in human beings is they will choose the best. Show them the choices available to them. Generally, they will choose the best. This is what we usually think happens when we go shopping. Little segment now on the philosophy of shopping. Say, spring is coming. I'm going to need a new pair of shorts, and I don't want to shop online. Maybe I do. I'll go to the mall, what used to be called a mall, and I'll walk around the mall, and I'll see a pair of shorts hanging in one store window, and I'll go up to the pair of shorts and I will examine it, look at the fabric, look at the stitching, look at the price tag. I don't want to buy immediately. I want a comparison shop. That's why I went to the mall, because especially unlike online, you can feel the fabric for yourself. So I walk around the mall and I see the same pair of shorts, or what looks like the same pair of shorts, and I go into the store and I look at the shorts, same fabric, same stitching, except the price tag here is $10 higher. This one is $35, that one is $25, and it's the same thing. How do I proceed? Do I say to myself, oh, I am stupid, I am spiteful, I am rebellious, I will pay more when I could pay less? Obviously, that's not what usually occurs. Generally, we think if you take the time and trouble, you can buy good merchandise and avoid purchasing bad merchandise. I won't call this the philosophy of shopping anymore. I'll use the more technical term, the free enterprise economic system. The economic system, by and large, it's considered we'd always had in the United States, and also, again, our allies, especially in Western Europe. Free enterprise supposed to be responsible for so much of our country's wealth, and the free enterprise system was developed by a famous economist in Scotland named Adam Smith. His great little book, another little book called The Wealth of Nations, came out in that great year for free enterprise, 1776, and the basic theme of The Wealth of Nations relies on three assumptions. Assumption number one, human beings are self-interested. Not necessarily that we are endlessly greedy, but just that when push comes to shove, you care more about yourself and your family than you do about other people, especially about strangers. Second assumption, consumers are educated and informed. We have the information, as in my example. I can go into the stores, I can look at the shorts, examine the fabric, examine the stitching, look at the price tag. I have the information, and I'm educated enough to judge what is a good fabric, what is quality stitching. I'm educated and informed. And assumption number three, there is equal access to the marketplace. Producers have equal access to consumers. Consumers have equal access to producers. And this does not have to be exactly equal access. That would probably be impossible in this complicated world, but approximately equal access would do. After all, when you walk into a shopping mall, only one store can be directly across from the entranceway. That store will have the best access to the consumer, but as long as it's easy to walk around the mall and get to the other stores, that counts as equal access. Given these three assumptions, especially the first seemingly unhopeful assumption that people are self-interested, and I call that seemingly unhopeful. After all, how can we ever develop a good society? People don't care about the social good. They only care about their own good. Adam Smith's great insight, what makes him so well loved in places like the United States, take people's self-interest and arrange it properly, that is to say, competitively, and the very best will result. Competition everywhere. Take the producers, make them compete with each other for the approval of the consumer, and the self-interest of the producer will compete with the self-interest of the consumer. It is in the self-interest of the producer to charge you the highest price. Have you ever noticed that, by the way? It's in the self-interest of the producer to charge you the highest price. That's not your self-interest, though. Your self-interest is not to pay the highest price. Your self-interest is to pay the lowest price. And so Adam Smith called this the famous invisible hand of the marketplace, the self-interest of the consumer, demanding low prices, pushing prices down, pushing quality up. After all, it's in the self-interest of the producer to cut back on the quality of the merchandise that they're selling you so they can cut down on the cost and so they can make even more money. That's not your self-interest. You don't want to buy a car of bad quality. You want to buy a car of good quality. And so, of course, the invisible hand of the marketplace here, the self-interest of the consumer, demanding high quality. So give people a choice. Generally speaking, they will choose the best. So good companies that make good products, should I use Toyota, they'll have lots of customers, they'll make lots of sales, they'll make lots of money. They will thrive and continue to offer us good choices in the future. Bad companies that make bad products. I always used to like the Yugo automobile, if you're familiar with that piece of trash. Movie Drowning Mona, everyone in it drives a Yugo to make fun of the car. Made in Yugoslavia. The country fell apart, the car falls apart also. I think it was during the war in Bosnia. We said it was an accident. We bombed a Yugo factory. Nobody in the world believed it was an accident. They all thought we were just trying to get this piece of trash off the road. Some people did buy it. They realized pretty quickly what a piece of trash they was. They didn't buy it again. That company has gone bankrupt. Good companies that offer us good products, they'll make lots of money. They will thrive, offer us good choices in the future. Bad companies that make bad products, they'll go bankrupt, and we won't have to waste our time worrying about their trash anymore. And since Adam Smith was alive in 1776 to show how this would work more precisely, let's imagine we are out on the American frontier and I am making and selling plows. What two numbers do I multiply together at the end of any given time period, say a week, to get the net profit on my plow making activity? There's the profit I make on each plow times the number of plows that I sell. The profit I make on each plow, let's say plows sell in our neighborhood for about $20. They cost $19 to make, so I'm making a big $1 on each plow. I make and sell 100 a week. I'm making $100 a week, plenty of money back in 1776. Suppose one of these self-interested plow producers decides to try to express their self-interest by raising the price of the plow. Instead of charging $20, now they'll charge $21. Cost, of course, will hold steady at $19. 21 subtract 19. Now I'm making $2 a plow, figuring if I can make and sell the same 100 I've been making and selling for a long time now, I'll make $200 at the end of the week instead of just $100 at the end of the week. Double my profit. Pretty smooth marketing strategy. It is not. Of course, people won't buy plows for $21 when they are equally accessible, equally available for $20. Really, eventually, I won't sell any plows. I won't make any money. I will go bankrupt. And so the pressure on prices is always down, especially if I have extra productive capacity, maybe to make 100 plows. I'm not really working as hard as I'm willing to work. I'm only working 30 hours a week. I'm willing to work half again as much. I'm willing to work 45 hours a week, in which case I'll produce half again as many. Instead of 100, I'll produce 150. What do I do to my $20 price now to make sure that I will be able to sell all of my increased production? Price comes down a little bit. We'll have a sale on plows this week. We'll sell them for $19.90. In theory, even just taking a dime off the price, given equal access, should be sufficient to bring to you most of the consuming public. When your stereotypical American motorist drives through your stereotypical American intersection with a gas station on each of the four corners, if 3 of the gas stations are selling unleaded regular for $3.25 and one of of them is selling it for $3.21, given that it's equally easy to make a right as a left, you don't pull into the one for $3.25 if you can pay $3.21. So now you will be able to sell all of your 150. You're only making 90 cents on each one, $19.90, and the cost is $19. But 90 cents times 150, higher mathematics, take out your calculators, I'll give you a minute. That's $135, 90%. You can, it's easy, by the way, because the 10% that's left over of 150, just knock off the zero, 15 is left, subtracted from 150, $135. I like my arithmetic classes, by the way. That would be a pretty smooth marketing strategy. So the pressure on prices always down. Similarly, pressure on quality always up. Suppose one of these self-interested plow producers decides to express their self-interest not by raising the price, that's too obvious. Maybe they'll cut back on the quality of some of the material used in production. Instead of making my plows out of relatively expensive metal fasteners, I'll make them out of cheaper plastic fasteners, and maybe somebody will come, some sucker will come into my store and buy one of these plows with a plastic fastener. They won't examine it closely enough. What's going to happen? They're going to take the plow home. They're going to put it in the ground. First thing that's going to happen is the plow is going to break. Next thing that happens is the consumer is going to curse. Next thing that happens, they will come into my store and curse me loudly in front of all of my other customers. What are you doing selling plows with plastic fasteners? These things break immediately. They are completely worthless. And so an additional underlying assumption here that consumers will share information with each other about the products that they are buying, and obviously we do that. So if you make plows with plastic fasteners, eventually you're not going to sell any. Sales will drop off completely and you'll wind up going bankrupt. And so the pressure on prices always down, the pressure on quality always up, and producers will be stimulated to make and sell as many as they can, provided we never tax producers. What's called in the modern world supply-side economics. The official guru, Arthur Laffer, formerly an economics professor at the University of Southern California, very much influenced President Ronald Reagan. Supply-side economics. Don't tax the supply side, don't tax producers. You tax the producer, you take away their profits. What money does a business have at the end of the day, the week, the month, the year, other than their profits? To the extent that you tax away their profits, to that extent you tax away their incentive. Why should I work hard, break my back all week long, make money? Government comes, taxes away my money. To the extent that government taxes away their profits, taxes away their money, to that extent government taxes away their incentive. To that extent they're going to produce less. We're going to have less. They're going to close factories, lay off workers, high unemployment, lots of social welfare spending, not too many people working, paying taxes. The budget is going to get out of balance. This is going to be a disaster. Don't tax the producer. Don't tax the supply side. Give them their full profit. That will give them the maximum incentive to produce as much as they can. Then we will have as much as we can. They'll be opening factories, hiring workers. Everyone will have a job. Hardly anybody getting social welfare payments. Lots of workers paying in taxes to support the systems. Let the good times roll. Or as President Reagan put it, and I believe he was really taking this from President Kennedy, nice combination there, Kennedy and Reagan, a rising tide floats all boats. Just like the tide, when it's rising, coming into the harbor at flood stage, raises the level at which every boat floats. So cut back on business taxes, cut back on business regulation, give them the maximum incentive to produce as much as they can. This will let loose a flood of production, which, like the tide coming into the harbor at flood stage, raises the level at which every boat floats. This flood of production will raise the level of everybody's economic boat, especially since these products are high quality, low price. Everyone will be able to afford at least some of them. Everybody's boat will float higher. And the best way to get the competitive advantage on all the other producers, so your cost can be lower, so your price can be lower, so everyone will buy from you. I used to like to say, beat your workers, make them work harder, but that may break their bones, and then they can't work at all. And very often students would say, pay your workers more money to give them more incentive to work hard. And that sounds good, but really it's a disaster, as Marx points out in a lecture I haven't given quite yet, because if I pay my workers more money, I'm raising my cost. If I compensate to maintain my profit margin by raising my price, customers are going to go elsewhere and I'm going to go bankrupt. And if I pay my workers more money and raise my cost and don't raise my price, now I have less money and I need my money, I need my profits as much as possible, as quickly as possible, to reinvest in the latest technology, to upgrade my technology. And so that's the best way to make your business more efficient, so your costs can be less, so your price can be less. Get rid of your workers completely and replace them by machines. After all, machines don't need vacation time, they don't want sick time, they work 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, a little downtime for a squirt of oil. So if I can come up with a machine that does the job a little bit more efficiently than what you've got, maybe just take a dime off my cost of production. Instead of $19, my cost of production is $18.90. Now I can lower my price correspondingly 10 cents from $20 to $19.90. Price is $19.90, cost is $18.90, maintains my profit margin at $1 per plow. Now everybody is going to buy from me because my price is lower. That expands my profits. I take my expanded profits. I buy more of these efficient machines. That expands my production pretty dramatically. And everybody, or pretty much everybody, is going to buy from me because my price is lower. That expands my profits dramatically. I take my dramatically expanded profits. I buy a huge amount of these efficient machines. That expands my production hugely. And pretty much everybody buys from me because my price is lower. That expands my profits astronomically. I take my astronomical profits, I buy an astronomical amount of these efficient machines. By now, of course, I am producing enough to satisfy all of market demand by myself. I am making all the sales. My competitors are going bankrupt. They're going to be out of business. I'm going to make a fortune. So if you are my competitor and you see I have come up with a machine slightly better than what you've got, I'm making all the sales, you're going bankrupt, you're going to be out on the streets, homeless, hungry, and cold. What are you going to have to do as soon as you possibly can? You're going to have to get one of those machines also. Well, how are you going to do that? Often my students would say, oh, you can buy one. No, they're not in the store. I invented it. It's my machine, like Mr. Gates. It's in my factory, my warehouse. I've got my guards at the door, and you can't offer to buy it from me. I'm wiping you out of business. I'm going to corner the market. I'm going to make a fortune. You don't have enough money to even make it, maybe think that it's worth my while. In order to get one of these, and I always like to say, by the way, your ability to answer this question correctly will probably have more to do with your ability to be a success in your future than any grade that you ever got in macroeconomics or microeconomics. In order to get your hands on one of these machines, you're going to have to, did I hear somebody say, steal it? If that's what you said, my prediction is you will do very well in this world. Of course, you can't steal it yourself. You're my competitor. I know what you look like. You're going to have to hire somebody called an industrial spy. Come to work for me. Pretend that they're working for me. Really, behind the scenes, they're working for you. This, I believe, is the theme of the great classic movie, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Chocolate Factory, the one with Gene Wilder, of course, is my favorite one. Isn't that whole movie just a big charade that Willy Wonka and Slugworth are having to see if there's one kid who's honest enough that he won't serve Slugworth as a spy, spying on Willy Wonka? Same theme, by the way, with a movie called The Pirates of Silicon Valley about Steve Jobs and Apple computer. But in any case, then you get yourself an industrial spy. Their job is to come in and steal a copy of the machine. If it's too big to take it all out in one piece, then they'll disassemble it, take it out a little bit at a time. If I have metal detectors at the door, then they'll take out a small camera, take pictures of all the different parts and how they work together. Then you will have your copy of this efficient machine, and just before you go into production with that machine yourself, you're going to try to use your intelligence to make it just a little bit better, because if you can make it just a little bit better, cut another dime off the cost of production from 1890, what I had before, now to 1880, then you can lower your price below 1990 to 1980. That maintains your dollar profit margin, and now pretty much everyone is going to buy from you because your price is lower. That's going to expand your profits. You take your expanded profits, you buy more of these efficient machines, more of these more efficient machines. That expands your production pretty dramatically, and pretty much everybody buys from you because your price is lower, expands your profits dramatically. You take your dramatically expanded profits, you buy an astronomical amount of these more efficient machines, expands your profits astronomically, and now you're the one who is fulfilling market demand. You're the one wiping out the competition. You're the one making a fortune. And so promise people a huge fortune. Note there really isn't any middle ground here. Either you have the best technology and you make a fortune, everybody else goes bankrupt. They're out of business, out on the streets, homeless, hungry, and cold. So everybody is driven by force of necessity to their maximum effort. Try as hard as you can, make a little improvement, make a little improvement, make a little improvement. Look what's happened over time. All of these little improvements have added up to enormous improvements, generated the amazing technologies we see all around us today, do the job so much faster than they ever could have imagined back when Adam Smith wrote this in 1776, making us much richer than any previous generation could have imagined. Take the formula for free enterprise, plug it into your country's economy, watch it do its magic, the magic of the marketplace, Reagan called it. Spew forth massive quantities of high-quality, low-priced goods. Give people plenty of incentive to produce as much as they can, provided we don't tax the producers, and set off a mad scramble to not go bankrupt, but to become the next millionaire, have the best technology. Look what's happened over time. Look how wealthy our country has become. And so the main ideas, freedom and choice. Let people be free to produce whatever they want. Then we will see all the different choices of all the different products that anyone can think of. Can't expect to see choices that people don't think of. Have confidence. Educated and informed consumers generally will choose the best. Generally, not always. Again, people do make mistakes. Some people did buy the Yugo automobile. Again, if they bought that car, they realized pretty quickly it was a piece of trash, and they never bought it again, even if somehow they themselves didn't see what a piece of trash their car was. Their friends sure did. They laughed at them and made fun of them. They did not buy that car. And so over time, the good companies that make good products, maybe I should use Toyota, they will thrive. They will offer us good choices in the future. Bad companies that make bad products, for a while there I was using Toyota, they won't have many customers. They will vanish. Won't seduce consumers in the wrong direction anymore. Same theme now applies to social philosophy, coming back to on liberty. Let people be free to live however they want, provided they're not hurting anybody else, then we will see all the different choices of all the different ways of living. Just like in economics, we saw the choices of all the different products, here we see all the different choices of all the different ways of living. Have confidence, faith in humans. Generally speaking, people will make the right choice. Not always, of course. We're humans, not gods. This isn't heaven. There's no happily ever after. After all, the discussion did get off the ground with a discussion of bums in the Bowery, drunks in the Bowery. People do make mistakes. Confidence, fear, faith in human beings. You'll learn from your mistake. If somehow you make a mistake, you get addicted to alcohol or drugs, eventually you'll realize what a mess this is making of your life and get yourself to detox as soon as you possibly can. Even if you yourself don't see what a mess alcohol and drugs is making of your life, you're too drunk and stoned to even notice. Your friends will see and they will know. Don't pursue that way of living. And so good ways of living, the higher pleasures, philosophy, music, poetry, they will thrive. They will offer people good choices in the future. Bad ways of living, alcohol and drugs, they will vanish. They won't seduce people in the wrong direction anymore. And if the opposite seems to be true, as I noted again in the philosophy is more pleasurable than sex lectures, as far as Mill is concerned, the superior pleasures, the higher pleasures have not won. Philosophy club discussions, almost nobody goes. Poetry readings and so forth, whereas the bars packed to capacity, long lines, fake IDs, get inside, maybe get the chance, get smashed on intoxicants, get lucky, get some animalistic sex. When people make the wrong choice like that, as far as Mill is concerned, the explanation always revolves around assumption number 2. Education and information. People make the wrong choice. Usually it's because they are badly informed and not very well educated. After all, the higher pleasures, education. Of course, most people don't get an education that challenges them to think. It's just memorize, spit back and forget. To make room for the next load of stuff, you memorize and spit back and forget. Just a boring, stress-filled pain in the ass. And what kind of information do we get about alcohol and the consumption of alcohol, especially from the alcohol industry? The alcohol commercials, of course, so very ever-present, especially in the sporting events. Many of the sporting teams, their stadiums are named for alcohol companies. Busch Stadium, Coors Field, Miller Park in Milwaukee. What information does the alcohol industry give us about the consumption of alcohol? If you are the type of person who consumes alcohol, you are. We can play this like Family Feud, past class survey. Number one answer is, people have said fun, of course. You're the kind of person who is effervescent. You're glamorous. The answer I like the best myself is people who drink alcohol are glamorous and sexy. And once, this was a long time ago, apologies to younger people, you can find it on the computer. I was teaching a huge class and somebody yelled out from the back. I said, if you are the type of person that drinks alcohol, what type of person are you? And the guy yelled out, you get the twins. Some of you older people remember that commercial? I like football on TV, shots of Gina Lee and twins. I looked it up last night, by the way. It's a Coors Light commercial. If you're the type of person that drinks, you get the twins. And so education, boring, stress-filled, pain in the ass, memorize, spit back and forget. Alcohol, you're glamorous and sexy, you get the twins. Badly educated, ill-informed. No wonder people make the wrong choice. But if they were well educated and properly informed, generally speaking, our faith in human beings, mostly people choose the best. We do make mistakes. We'll learn from your mistake. Even if you don't, your friends will. Over time, the good should win. Good companies that make good products, good ways of living, they will win. Bad companies that make bad products, who wants to drive a bad car, who wants to live a bad life, they will lose, they will vanish. Same thread of argument in politics. We want many different political parties a multi-party system, many choices among which we can choose, and have confidence that educated and informed citizens generally will choose the best. And here, since majority rules, having most people usually choosing the best, that should be sufficient. Good political parties, like good ways of living, like good companies that make good products, they'll get lots of customers, they'll get lots of votes, they'll win the elections, lead our country in a good direction in the future. Bad political parties with bad programs, just like bad ways of living, like bad companies that make bad products. Who wants to drive a bad car? Who wants to have a bad government? They won't have many customers. They won't get any votes. They will vanish. We won't have to waste our time reading their party platforms anymore. And Mill favored representative democracy, where we elect representatives that make the laws for us, the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C., the Senate, the State Senate, the Assembly, the governors elect representatives to make the laws for us. Mill really did not like direct democracy, where we, the people, make the laws, like in California with the propositions that we vote on, and it's our vote that counts. Shall this proposition be the law and policy for the state of California? Shall this law or proposition not be policy for the state of California? Mill did not want your average person to make the decisions, because as far as Mill is concerned, your average person is not well educated enough to make the decisions. Making decisions on how to run a modern city, county, state, country takes great expertise in a wide variety of areas. You should be an expert in economics, of course, to ensure our country's future prosperity. Maybe an expert in sociology to help you deal with our widely diverse domestic population. Psychology, get the most out of negotiations with domestic leaders and foreign leaders. Maybe history, culture, language of our major enemies and allies. Takes great expertise in all of these areas. Your average person doesn't know how to do this. You wouldn't even know how to begin. But just because you can't make something government policy doesn't mean you can't judge if that's something, if the policy is good. For example, you can't make a high-quality, low-priced car. You wouldn't even know how to begin. That takes great expertise. You have to be an expert in engineering. You have to be an expert in design, marketing. It takes teams of experts to make high-quality, low-priced cars. You wouldn't even know how to begin making a high-quality, low-priced car. But just because you can't make a high-quality, low-priced car doesn't mean you can't judge which cars are high-quality relative to a low price. In fact, of course, when you go to buy a car, that's exactly what the salesperson tells you to do. Take it out for a test drive. Test it yourself. See if you like it. Take it out on the freeway. See how it accelerates. Take it in the neighborhood. See how it takes corners at high speeds, the way I notice most of you drive. Check the gas mileage rating, the price against the Blue Book value if it's a used car. We usually think if you take the time and trouble, you can do a pretty good job of judging which cars are the good buys, high quality relative to low price. You don't know how to make one. You wouldn't even know how to begin. Take the time and trouble. You can judge which cars are the good ones. So the same thing with government policy. You don't know how to make it. You wouldn't even know how to begin. But if you take it time and trouble, keep up with current events, read newspapers from a wide variety of different points of view, take the time and trouble, you can judge which policies are good. Only you can decide if you like your government. Just like only you can decide if you like your car, if you just bought a new car and you think it stinks, you hate it, you think it's a lemon, you take it back to complain. It would be ridiculous for the salesperson to say to you, oh, you only think you don't like your new car. Really, you're as happy with it as you could possibly be. So it would be equally ridiculous for the government to say to us, oh, you only think you don't like our policies. Really, they're making you as happy as you could possibly be. Only you can decide if you like your car. Only you can decide if you like your government. And you had better be the one to decide, because if you leave it up to them, what kind of car are they going to sell you? One that's good for you? one that's good for them. What I like to call basic assumption number one. People are self-interested. Leave it up to the people in the government, and instead of doing what we want them to do, make for the greatest happiness for the greatest number, they'll just make for the greatest happiness for themselves. Instead of pursuing the social good, they'll just pursue their own good. And so to prevent them from doing that and make them serve the people, first, to make the government serve the people, hold frequent elections. Don't let them stay in office too long. If you elect a rascal or an incompetent, you don't want to be stuck with them for a long time. Make it easy to get rid of them. Hold elections frequently. Second, don't trust them. Recognize they are humans, like everyone else, subject to temptation, subject to corruption. Not to say that politicians are an especially corrupt group of human beings, although maybe they are, but certainly they are human beings, subject to temptation, subject to corruption. Recognize that, realize you have to watch them carefully, like a hawk watches a mouse, every move it makes, and act on the general principle. One of my favorite pieces of practical advice will resound through many of my lectures. If something looks funny, chances are it is funny. That doesn't mean it is funny. Maybe there's another explanation. But be suspicious, investigate carefully. If, for example, I come home early from work, find my wife with her tongue down another guy's throat, that looks suspicious, like she's having an affair. But be open-minded. Maybe there's another explanation. My wife is an excellent cook, specializing in fish. Maybe she was preparing her lunch. Somebody dropped by unexpectedly. She thought it would be rude to not offer him a taste. He started to choke on a bone, and she thought her tongue was the most prehensile instrument she could use to extract the bone from his throat. Keep in mind, maybe there's another explanation, but be suspicious. Investigate carefully. Or a more realistic example, here we are fighting wars in the Middle East, the world's most oil-rich region. Our economy, and also and especially the economies of all our friends and allies, depend completely on our having uninterrupted access to Middle Eastern oil at a cheap price. But they tell you it's not about oil, it's about freedom. Well, maybe it is. Maybe that's the explanation, but be suspicious. Investigate carefully. As the Founding Fathers warned us, the price of liberty is constant vigilance, constant watchfulness. You must watch your elected representatives constantly. If you don't, as soon as you take your eyes off them, whose interest are they going to try to serve? Their own. You must watch them constantly and eternally. And third, pay them well, punish them severely, pay them well enough so they can afford to buy just about anything their hearts desire. I can't say anything their hearts desire. You never know what the human heart is going to desire. If I'm a good governor in California, I want to be able to own San Francisco. If I'm a good president of the United States, I want to be able to own California. You can't own San Francisco, you can't own California, but pay them enough that they can afford to buy just about anything any reasonable person could want. Then they have just about no reason to take bribes, become corrupt, betray our trust. Why should they? They have pretty much everything already. And let them know that if they are caught taking bribes or being corrupt, they will be punished severely. They will lose everything that they have, be reduced to a very degraded circumstance. This will minimize corruption. I can't say it will eliminate corruption. Again, we're humans, not angels or gods. It's always possible that things will go wrong. But there are strategies to maximize the chance that things will go wrong, strategies to minimize the chance that things will go wrong. This will minimize the chance. Pay them well so they can afford to buy just about anything they want, just about no reason to take a bribe or be corrupt. They have pretty much everything already. Carrot and stick. Let them know that if they're caught taking bribes, they'll be punished severely. That will minimize corruption. If you do the opposite, if you pay them badly, so there are many things in life that they are wanting, so their spouse is constantly complaining at them, why don't we have this? Why don't we have that? All of our friends' families have all of these things. Only your family is deprived because of your stupid public service job. And if they know that if they're caught taking bribes or being corrupt, almost nothing will happen to them, then corruption will be maximized. And to interject a note of reality, if I am allowed to do that in a philosophy class, do we pay our politicians well? Mayor of San Diego, 6th or 7th largest city in the country, over 1 million people, makes, I think, $100,000. Members of the House of Representatives, the Senate, the governing body for the world's wealthiest and most powerful nation, $150,000, $200,000. The President of the United States, the most powerful person in the history of the world, makes, I think, got a raise during my lifetime from $225,000 to something like $400,000. Is that a lot? I used to have students in the community colleges thought that sounded good, but generally speaking, say my business majors at San Diego State, the University of San Diego, I had some of them tell me they expected to start after graduation at $70,000 a year, roughly what the mayor makes. I remember, and this was back in the early 80s, one of my friends graduated law school, Hastings Law School, one of the better law schools. Bolt, of course, is the best. Graduated Law Review, top 10% of his class got a job working in San Diego, Gray Carey, famous local law firm, and even back then they started him at $100,000 a year, more than the mayor makes. And my friend was very smart and he worked very hard. I hope the mayor of our city is even smarter than my friend and works even harder to take care of the city's business than my friend worked to take care of the law firm's business. Lawyers, accountants, doctors. The guy across the street from me is a plumber. Best Value Plumbing. He tell me he makes $150,000 a year. He's not the kind of plumber you call if your hair stops up the drain. He puts in the expensive bathroom fixtures in the new condos in La Jolla and Point Loma, and it's very, very important to have good plumbing. It's very, very important to have good plumbing, but it's even more important to have incorruptible legislatures, and I won't even talk about what Alex Rodriguez made any baseball player nowadays. They expect to sign contracts for $250 million. A-Rod made $250 million, didn't even play for his last couple of years. And maybe I should have wore my Yankees shirt. I was born in the Bronx. It's very important to me that the Yankees have a good third baseman. Very important to me that the Yankees have a good third baseman. But it's even more important to me that our governors are not corruptible. And so from this point of view, we do not pay our politicians well, and if they are caught engaging in corrupt activities, what is the usual punishment that they get? A phrase I usually hear, of course, a slap on the wrist, or as one of my students once put it, 6 months confinement in a minimum security country club that we know from Martha Stewart is called Camp Cupcake, where they spend their time writing their memoirs and getting ready to appear on the talk show circuit when they get out. Not exactly severe punishment. In order to minimize corruption, pay our politicians well, at least as well as a good third baseman, at least as well as a good guitar player, then they will have much less reason to take bribes, become corrupt, and sell us out to the special interests. Why should they? They have pretty much everything already, and let them know that if they're caught engaging in corrupt activities, they will be punished severely. I always used to recommend sentencing them to 30 years in the federal penitentiary in Leavenworth. All I really ever knew about Leavenworth was that it was a really tough federal prison. Then I found out that Leavenworth is in Kansas, and it occurred to me you don't even really have to put them in prison. Make them live the rest of their lives in Kansas. Worst punishment any San Diegan could imagine, although one of my students once did suggest maybe 6 months confinement in a Hare Krishna temple, whichever you think is worse. Although the videographer, Jake, by the way, said 6 months confinement in a Hare Krishna temple in Kansas. That would be the worst. This should minimize corruption, make the government serve the people. Now that government serves the people, we're not going to live happily ever after. Again, there is no such thing. Sorry about this. This is earth, not heaven. No such thing as happily ever after here. There are always potential problems, and the potential problem now that majority rules and government serves the people is the problem of the tyranny of the majority. Tyranny from the word tyrant. A tyrant is an absolute dictator, the dictatorship of the majority. Now that government serves the people, democracy, majority rules, what prevents the majority from being like a dictator? Taking away the rights of the minority. Just like dictators take away the rights of everyone except themselves, what prevents the majority from being like a dictator? Taking away the rights of everybody except themselves, taking away the rights of everybody who isn't in the majority, taking away the rights of the minority. And Mill recognizes you can never be sure of preventing the tyranny of the majority. It is always possible that things will go wrong, but to minimize the chance of the tyranny of the majority being like a dictator, taking away the rights of everybody who isn't part of the majority, Mill favors having an enlightened majority. Enlightened means seeing all sides of the issue. That's what it means for Mill to be enlightened, see all sides of the issue. Same thread of argument that has run through this lecture, see all the different choices, all the different products, all the different ways of living, all the different political parties, all the different sides of the issue of the tyranny of the majority. Generally, people will choose the best. So, show them all sides of the issue. Show them what it's like to be part of the majority, votes to take away the rights of the minority. Show them what it's like to be part of the minority, where the majority votes to take away their rights. Show them both sides. Reminiscent of the famous elementary school experiment done by the great genius teacher Jane Elliott, see or read Eye of the Storm. Happened in the aftermath of the assassination of Martin Luther King, exercise and racial sensitivity, chose some arbitrary physical trait and divided her class not on the basis of skin color, but on the basis of eye color. I may be extrapolating a little bit here. Take these students who had the eye color of the majority, that is brown eyes. A majority of human beings have brown eyes, and initially make them the masters. They got lots of praise, they got lots of privilege, they got lots of choices of good food for lunch, they had a long and rich recess period. The non-brown-eyed students, a minority of human beings, do not have brown eyes. Initially, they were made the slaves. They got lots of chores and lots of criticism. They didn't get any choice of what they were having for lunch. It was just one thing, and it wasn't very good. They didn't get a long and rich recess period. They didn't get a recess period. They cleaned up after the brown-eyed students, and after a while, when she saw some of the brown-eyed students were starting to feel superior, she enlightened them. She showed them the other sides. Now, the non-brown-eyed students, they would be the masters. They would get the praise. They would get the privilege. privilege. The brown-eyed students, they would be the slaves. They would get the chores. They would get the criticism, and she would switch it back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until they had learned thoroughly what it was like to be on both sides of a distinction made on the basis of some arbitrarily chosen physical characteristic like the color of your eyes, because she knew, of course, these elementary school kids would grow older, they would graduate, they would get the right to vote, and maybe one day somebody would say something like, we, the majority of brown-eyed people, should vote to enslave the minority of non-brown-eyed people. And if I am not enlightened, maybe initially that will appeal to me. Maybe you noticed as I said this, I have brown eyes, and maybe I know some non-brown-eyed people. It sounds like it would be a lot of fun to have that person for my slave. Yes, I'll vote for that. And then maybe the next thing somebody says is, we, the majority of white-skinned people, should vote to enslave the minority of non-white-skinned people. And if I am not enlightened, maybe I will go for that. Maybe you noticed as I said that I have white skin. Maybe I know some non-white-skinned people. I think it sounds like it would be a lot of fun to have that person for my slave. Yes, I'll vote for that. But if I am enlightened, I realize now the door is open, and maybe the next thing I'm going to hear is some jerk say something like, we, the majority of straight-haired people, should vote to enslave the minority of curly-haired people. And as a curly-haired person, I won't like that at all. And so to be fully enlightened, everyone must be brought to realize we all have some physical characteristic that could potentially place us in some oppressed minority group. You never know what they're going to pick. Even blonde hair, one of the supposed icons of Western culture, they have the stereotype of being dumb. Dumbs are not blonde. I have seen all the time. There was a car here that was parked on the side near the sidewalk with a dent in it, and it had a sticker on it that said blonde driving. And I used to have a young blonde female sitting right in front of me with a cup given to her by her father that said, please speak slowly. I'm naturally blonde. I wasn't sure if that was for her or for me. You never know what they're gonna pick. So if you are enlightened, you realize everyone has some physical characteristic or other that could potentially place them in some arbitrarily chosen minority group. And so if you want to make sure you are never enslaved on the basis of your arbitrarily chosen physical characteristic, never consent to making any distinctions on the basis of any arbitrarily chosen physical characteristic, whether it's the color of your eyes, or the color of your hair, or the shape of your eyes, or the shape of your hair, or the shape of your genitals. I think I covered just about all of them. As the great Bob Marley sings, perhaps this was the inspiration, until the color of a person's skin is of no more significance than the color of their eyes. Everywhere there will be war. And so the project becomes that of giving people an education to show them all sides. To this end, Mill knew government must not run education, because Mill realized if government runs education, government won't show all sides. How many sides will government show? Can you guess? One side. And whose side is that? Can you guess? Their side. That's not education at all. For Mill, education means seeing all sides. If you've been taught only one side, that's called indoctrination. So when Pink Floyd sings their famous lyric, we don't need no education, we don't need no thought control. No, what you do need is education. That shows you all sides. That's not thought control. You don't need indoctrination. That's thought control. To avoid having the government indoctrinate people in government-run schools, government-run indoctrination factories, how we're going to do that will be the subject of the next lecture.